What did you just say?
I couldn't believe the words that came out of John's mouth, and I asked him again with a trembling voice. Didn't you hear? You know the land from the family home you inherited, right? I've decided to build a house there. John spoke with casualness as if he was just mentioning he'd bought bread from a store. The new house is going to be so stylish, you won't even be able to compare it to the old one. It'll blow your mind. Huh? As I failed to grasp the situation, John said with a mocking laugh. My mistress and I are moving in next month. You need to disappear. With that one sentence, something inside me snapped. I quietly accepted the divorce papers with a lawyer's contact that John handed to me. Sorry to trouble you, but can you contact this lawyer by tomorrow? I have my reasons, and I need it done quickly. All right. I wish you happiness. I did as told, contacted the lawyer and proceeded with the divorce process. John was delighted, almost jumping for joy, as his plans proceeded without a hitch. However, a few months later, he would come to me in a state of sheer panic. My name is Susan Clark, 55 years old. I used to be a nurse, but now I'm a homemaker. Actually, this marriage was my second. My first marriage was when I was 26. I got married because I found out I was pregnant. But when my daughter Marissa was 3, he told me he had fallen in love with someone else. It was a shock, but part of me oddly accepted it. There had been many signs of incompatibility since we were dating, and even though we married because of the pregnancy, the divide only deepened. After our divorce, I raised Marissa alone while working as a nurse until she graduated from college. Once Marissa started her own life, I decided it was time to live mine. I met John Clark at a matchmaking party soon after that thought. I was 48 and thought it would be nice to have a partner to share my life with, so I started attending these events. He was 5 years my senior, financially stable, and looked younger than his age. He took a liking to me, we went out a few times, and eventually, we started a formal relationship and decided to marry. Since Marissa was living on her own, John and I started our married life together. He was also divorced, had separated from his wife a long time ago, and hadn't considered remarriage until he was 53. When I asked why he decided to remarry now, he would only say, just felt like it. Since we got married, I took on all the household duties. Because that's what John wanted. He was busy running his business and wanted me to quit my nursing job to take care of the home, which was his condition when he proposed. John seemed very satisfied with my homemaking. Especially my cooking, which he always complimented. John was with many demands, but since I had quit my job and we lived comfortably on his earnings, I wasn't really dissatisfied until that moment. 5 years passed peacefully in our marriage. During that time, my father fell ill and passed away at the age of 80. He had been living alone about an hour's drive from our place. My mother passed away when I was in high school, and since I left home after my first marriage, my father had been living alone in the family home. I had suggested living together, fearing he might be lonely, but he always declined with a laugh, saying he preferred being on his own. After marrying John, we didn't live with my father because he was against it. I frequently visited my childhood home to check on my father. But he suddenly fell ill and passed away. I deeply regretted not noticing sooner, and I grieved for a long time without letting John know. There wasn't much inheritance, just the family home filled with memories, a cozy, wooden house. It was something my father had commissioned from a local carpenter. The house was now vacant, and I couldn't bear to demolish it, so I often went back to maintain it. One day, something happened. After seeing John off at the front door in the morning, I was about to do some laundry when I noticed something strange. Huh? I couldn't lift my left arm. It seemed that one side of my body was paralyzed. Scared, I called John with my trembling right hand. His irritable voice came through. What do you want? How many times have I told you not to call me at work? Listen, my left hand suddenly won't lift. It seems paralyzed. Paralyzed? What do you expect me to do about it? If you're worried, just go to the hospital. John said indifferently. I know, but I'm worried about it. Could you accompany me? Filled with anxiety about my body's unusual condition, I pleaded with John, but he grunted with annoyance. I can't. I'm swamped right now. If you can't make it to the hospital on your own, you should call an ambulance. Despite my disappointment at his lack of concern, I hung up and called an ambulance. When I described my symptoms, they exclaimed, "That's serious," and took me to a major hospital. It seemed I had suffered a stroke, but since I was transported to the hospital quickly after onset, I didn't need surgery. Instead, I was treated with medication to dissolve the blood clot. Still, I was told I needed to stay in the hospital for the time being. As I lay in the hospital bed, the nurses kept asking, "Isn't your husband coming?" I mumbled something about him being busy. It was finally the end of John's workday when he called. "Hey, where the hell are you? What about dinner?" I was flabbergasted that his first concern was dinner. Did he not remember I called him this morning? "I called you this morning. I'm in the hospital." "What? You're still at the hospital? You've been there for quite a while." His casual response infuriated me, and I told him about the stroke. "Stroke? Why would something like that happen?" "I got it, I'm on my way," he said, finally sounding alarmed, and he came to the hospital. He visited my room, only to quickly go and speak to the doctor. Later, I overheard the nurses talking outside my room. "Did you hear about the stroke patient's husband today? He kept asking the doctor if his wife would have another stroke. He said he couldn't handle it if she became bedridden. How awful is that?" I knew they were talking about John. He was more worried about how my condition would affect his life than my health itself, and I sighed deeply. After that day, I continued my hospital stay, but John never showed up again after handling the paperwork on the first day. "Mom, I'm here." Marissa's bright voice came from the doorway, her smile shining. "Sorry to have you bring me things like clothes. You must be busy with work, right?" "It's no big deal," Marissa smiled back. "Don't worry about anything. You've worked hard your whole life, so just relax while you're here." I apologized repeatedly. And I was wishing John had been the one to help, but it turned out he had asked Marissa to do it. "I'm slammed with work, so could you take care of it?" he had told her. His attitude infuriated me, but he had said, "You owe it to your mother for raising you on her own. It's only natural for a daughter to look after her." "Are you okay, Mom?" Marissa looked at me. Her concern is more about having such a husband than about my health. I felt a twinge of worry about John's attitude, but thought he must be struggling at home without me, so I let it slide. I didn't want to worry Marissa. "I'm fine, no need to worry," I assured her with a smile, squeezing her hand. But when I returned home, I was met with a shocking sight. I had expected the house to be a mess, yet it was spotlessly clean, with no laundry in sight. But something was off. In John's bedroom, I detected the sweet scent of a woman's perfume. The conclusive evidence, however, was the long hair strand and a single earring dropped conspicuously on the floor. John is cheating on me. His lack of concern for my illness was bad enough, but to bring someone into our home while I was hospitalized was unforgivable. I decided to confront him. "I'm home," John called from the entrance. But I didn't go to greet him. "Hey, Susan? You're home, aren't you? What's the deal not coming to greet me?" He snapped from the foyer. Ignoring his voice, he entered the living room. I couldn't see his face from where I was, but I heard him drop his bag and approach. "Hey, have you gone deaf too? Greet me when I get home. Who do you think you are?" I couldn't stay silent anymore, turning to face him. "Who do I think I am? You didn't show up during my hospital stay or even pick me up when I was discharged. What about you?" John looked taken aback by my confrontational stance. "What's with this attitude? Who do you think pays for all this?" I showed him the earring I had found. "What's this?" John furrowed his brow for a moment, but when he realized they were women's earrings, he fell silent. His expression was unreadable. I pressed on. "You know what else is weird? How can you, who's never lifted a finger to do housework, keep this place so spotless?" John had divorced when he was young and had been single ever since, but it seems that until he turned 53, his mother took care of all the household chores. Even after we married, he never helped with the housework. I was flabbergasted once when I realized he didn't even know how to use a vacuum or a washing machine. "Are you cheating on me?" I asked. John let out a heavy sigh. And then, he started to chuckle. "What's so funny?" I wondered, trying to make him feel guilty, but it seemed he didn't feel a speck of it. "What's with the attitude? So what if I am cheating?" "What?" "It's a good time to tell you. You can't stay in this house anymore." I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. "What do you mean?" "I've decided to sell the house." It's gotten pretty old. What are you talking about? Where are we supposed to live then? The sudden turn of events left me struggling to keep up. But this was just the beginning. John dropped a bombshell. You have that land you inherited, right? I'm gonna build a house there and live with my mistress. What did you just say? I couldn't believe what John had just said, and I stood there, dumbfounded, looking at him. Didn't you hear me? You have that land from the family home you inherited, right? I've decided to build a house there. He spoke with the casualness of someone saying they'd bought bread from a store. What are you talking about? My family home is there. What about it? Oh, that outdated house? I don't care for it, so I had it demolished. What? I was stunned by the outrageous news, unable to process it. Yet John was shamelessly bragging about the house currently being built. The new house will be so stylish, you'd be surprised. What? Stylish or not, I couldn't care less about a house built on the site of my demolished family home. John looked at me with a mocking expression and said with a sneer, Mistress moves in next month. You need to disappear. That was the last straw for me. I suddenly felt calm and just stared at the man laughing hideously before me. John was going on about something, but I couldn't take any of it in. I quietly accepted the divorce papers with a lawyer's contact he handed me. Sorry to rush you, but could you contact the lawyer by tomorrow? I have my reasons for needing it done quickly. His brazen voice didn't stir a thing in me. Fine. Best of luck to you. I did as told, proceeded with divorce. John seemed almost to jump for joy that his plan was going forward. But a few months later, John would come to me in a frenzy. After the divorce, I immediately told Marissa that I had split with John and was single again. Then she said, actually, I'm relieved. I'll take care of Mom, so don't worry. I laughed and told her. Don't be silly. I'm not old yet. I plan to keep working as a nurse, so you've got nothing to worry about. Yes, after divorcing with John, I had gone back to nursing. It felt rewarding whenever patients thanked me, a stark contrast to the grumbles from John while I was doing household chores. I was enjoying my single life. But 3 months after divorcing, John showed up at my apartment. I turned off the TV at the loud banging on my door and went to see who it was. Peeking through the door's viewer, I saw John looking desperate. Who is it? I asked. Please, it's me. Susan, please open up. I almost wanted to retort that I didn't know any me, but it seemed too foolish. So I opened the door, keeping the chain on just in case. John's face, shining with sweat and his eyes darting around, was illuminated by the light from the slightly opened door. What do you want now, after all this time? Oh, how dare you speak to me like that after what you've put me through? John accosted me with bloodshot eyes. I responded calmly to his heated words. What are you talking about? I haven't done anything to you. You knew, didn't you? That there was a mortgage on that property. And you kept it hidden from me without saying a word. John was yelling desperately, but I couldn't help but laugh at his words. Of course, I wouldn't tell you. After all, I'm the one who inherited it. That land originally had nothing to do with you, did it? I implied to him that he should have known such a thing. Given John's old-fashioned ways, he probably thought that a wife's property belonged to her husband. But that notion was a mistake. When I pointed this out, John, exasperated, screamed and tore at his hair. Damn it, if I'd known there was a mortgage, I wouldn't have changed it into my name. Yes, John had changed the deed of the inherited land into his name by forging a power of attorney from me. Then, he had my family home torn down and built a new house to live in with his mistress. However, that land had been collateral for the purchase of my parents' house. When my parents could no longer pay the mortgage, the plan was to sell that land and use the proceeds for the payments. It's a common practice, as land often comes with a mortgage when taking out a home loan. But now, with life insurance linked to the group credit, if the person taking out a mortgage dies, the debt can be cancelled. Unfortunately, my father hadn't subscribed to such insurance. The mortgage on my family home was still outstanding, and I was undecided about taking on that debt. In the meantime, John had changed the land into his name and demolished my family home without my consent. It's your own doing whatever you want without telling me. Got what you deserved, right? So, what's up? Did you get a notice of foreclosure or something? I asked with a cold look, and John blurted out something shocking. It's not just a notice. The land's been auctioned off, and before I knew it, it was sold to someone I don't know. And now I have to leave that land. I couldn't believe it had been auctioned off and sold. The situation had progressed beyond my imagination. I insisted the house was mine, but some scary guys started showing up. As a result, I couldn't live there and was driven out. John said weakly, but I had not expected his situation to be so dire. Still, I felt no sympathy for John and actually felt a sense of schadenfreude. You keep talking about yourself, but what about your cheating partner? Weren't you planning to live with her? I felt a disconnect with John's words, always saying I instead of we. Then John's face grew even more haggard, and he sighed deeply. I was deceived. She was like a woman in it for the inheritance chase. Excuse me? Is it for the inheritance chase? She approached me knowing I was a CEO and had money, aiming for my assets. But I had nothing valuable left. John's words took me by surprise. What? Wasn't your company doing well? John shook his head weakly. No, actually, just before you were hospitalized, I was betrayed by someone, and my company ended up in serious debt. Is that so? This was news to me. According to John, the debt was astronomical, so much so that even throwing all his assets at it wouldn't cover it. That's why the company went bankrupt shortly after we split up. And you still thought it was a good idea to build a new house? I was genuinely astounded, and John looked up, almost pleadingly. I didn't want to build a house, really. If there was any money left from selling my house, I'd rather use it to rebuild the company. But Jane just wouldn't stop nagging about wanting a house. Jane was the mistress in question. John said she was 36, but looked so young and beautiful she could pass for someone in her 20s. Given the 24-year age gap between 60-year-old John and her, one would think he'd be suspicious of such a beautiful woman approaching him. John still thought of himself as hip and youthful, brimming with confidence, so it seemed he didn't notice. So you built her a house, huh? Yeah, but right after I built the house, my company went under, and when it turned out I was pretty much broke, Susan totally flipped on me. She had the nerve to say things like, if you're an old geezer with no money, I want nothing to do with you. Can you believe that? He must have been really stung by being ridiculed like that. John's eyes welled up with frustrated tears as he told me his story, but I felt nothing. I couldn't help but think it was his own fault for being taken in by such a superficial woman and kicking me to the curb. Don't you see you're not at fault here? Did it ever strike you as odd that a young, beautiful woman who's perfect at housekeeping would fall for a man 24 years her senior? When I pointed that out, John just scoffed. Perfect at housekeeping? You must be joking. When you were in the hospital, she kept my place tidy and cooked meals, but she hired a cleaning service for all of it. Once we started living together, she didn't work, lounged around at home all day, and didn't lift a finger to help. Yet she always found time to pamper herself. She was something else. Oh, really? It was clear he had only looked at her surface. And where are you living now? I asked, and John's face turned sheepish. In a cheap apartment near the old house. It was the only place I could get. I remembered the apartments near the old house. They were old and run down with flaking metal walls that were quite a sight. I never would have imagined John, who once lived so comfortably, ending up in such a dilapidated place. It's winter now, isn't it? The place isn't insulated, so it's freezing in there. He said, almost as if he was seeking pity. Your place looks much warmer. How come you're living here? Did you go back to nursing or something? The sudden shift to asking about my life made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't hide my distaste. That's none of your business. Why are you asking? Before I could finish, John was begging, please. What the heck? Would you consider starting over with me? I've missed you every day since we split. It hit me that the one I truly love is you. His unexpected plea left me bewildered. Did he really think I'd happily return to him just because he declared his love? John's gross misunderstanding made me sick to my stomach. He was completely disregarding my feelings. I'm sorry to say, but hearing I love you from you is the last thing I want. It's downright creepy. Why not? Don't say that. I dodged as he clung to the door. Besides, who would believe that you love me? It's not a lie. I really do need you. Need, huh? Sure, I guess you do need me. After all, you started thinking about remarriage at 53, the same age your mother passed away. When I mentioned that, John fell silent. You never told me what sparked your interest in remarrying, but it was because your mom was gone and you had no one to take care of you, wasn't it? Oh, no, that's not it. John replied with a forced smile, but his voice was faint. You say you need me, but what you really need isn't me specifically, you just need someone to take care of you. That's not true. Don't jump to conclusions. John sat in proper posture, a sickly ingratiating smile spreading across his face. It's not a conclusion without basis. When I had a stroke, you rushed to the hospital and went straight to consult with my doctor, didn't you? I know what you asked him. John had been grilling the doctor about whether I would end up bedridden and in need of care in the future. When I confronted him with that, his face turned pale as he muttered, "Why would you bring that up?" And started making excuses, saying, "It's not like that, I was just worried about you." Liar. You just didn't want to be saddled with taking care of me, did you? I know why you stopped visiting me. You wrote me off as old after seeing me have the stroke, didn't you? And then you chased after a much younger mistress. After all, the purpose of your marriage was to find someone to care for you in your old age. I had seen right through John's thoughts. Perhaps the affair with Marissa had been going on without my noticing, long before. But I'm sure the decision to leave me and choose Marissa happened after I collapsed. He chose a younger and healthier mistress over a wife with health concerns. While John was trembling with guilt, I told him, "I'm sorry, but I have no intention of ever getting back together with someone who could so coldly think of abandoning me while I was suffering without a shred of concern." Even as he tried to cling on, I called the police in front of him. "Hello? There's a strange person loitering outside my house." When I said that, John snapped, "All right, I'll leave," and vanished. After that, it was one disaster after another for John. That new house he built, of course, was still being watched by those intimidating men, making it impossible for him to return. But the house, designed to impress Marissa by a popular designer, still had a mortgage on it, and it seemed the payments were falling behind. If someone would buy the house, it seemed like his problems would be solved, but according to the intimidating landowner, there's talk of demolishing John's house eventually, leveling the lot, and putting the land up for sale. Even if the house is torn down, the mortgage remains, a truly tragic situation. John seems to have neither the energy nor the money to start a new business and is now just getting by with temp jobs and part-time work. Mentally and physically exhausted, he no longer resembles the prosperous man he once was. In fact, he looks older than his years now. As it turns out, the failure of John's previous marriage was also due to him throwing his weight around and behaving like a tyrant. He's always been the same, considering anything other than himself as trivial. That's why he was betrayed at work, choosing a mistress over his wife based on self-interest, and then betrayed by that mistress, leading him to this predicament. I doubt anyone will reach out to help him now. Yet, I don't feel a speck of sympathy for John. As for me, lately Marissa has moved into my apartment, and we've been living together happily. Her workplace is close to my apartment, and she said it was a waste to pay rent for a separate place. But I knew that she decided to live with me because she was concerned about my health. She seemed to be worried about how I was coping after my stroke and divorce from John. But no need to worry. I've been keeping up with regular checkups at the clinic and have even improved my lifestyle. Lately, I've been feeling great. I've completely forgotten about John, and he hardly ever crosses my mind now. When I was hospitalized, John never visited me, but the nurses were so kind and became a source of support. Now, working as a nurse myself, I strive to be as supportive to others as I was once helped. I'm looking forward to going to spa with Marissa. My life is still very much ahead of me.